Chapter 1, In the Beginning. What if everything we were taught about the Bible and history was only a small part of the truth? When it comes to the Garden of Eden, we're often bombarded with information about the Middle East, but rarely is there a focus on the fact that one of the rivers encompassed a major portion of Africa. Paintings, TV shows, and movies create our perception of Eden for us, but rarely are the words of the Bible taken into consideration when the images we are shown are created. The automatic assumption is that Adam and Eve were Caucasian. For the last 700 years, Europeans have been in a position of power, which has allowed them to influence the way the world perceives people in the Bible. In order to come out of the deception and break off the chains of deception, we must start at the very beginning so that we can understand not only the truth, but also the lies that have been used to keep that truth hidden from us. Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and shew thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. Jeremiah chapter 33, verse 3. The location of Eden. The cradle of civilization is believed to be where mankind got its start. All my life I've heard two different arguments for where this actually occurred. 1, Africa. 2, Mesopotamia, or the Middle East. There's no way that both arguments could be right, or could they? In Western society, we tend to think of the Middle East as some separate area not associated with Africa, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The Middle East was physically connected to Africa until the Suez Canal was built in 1869 to permanently separate Africa from Israel. Before European invasion, most of the area was under African control for thousands of years. Let's look at a map of Africa, Israel, and the Middle East before we continue. Pay special attention to where each area is located. If there is still doubt in your mind as to the physical connection of Israel to Africa, here is a tectonic plate map. Notice that Israel is part of the African plate. Now that we have a clear idea of where everything is located on a map, it seems obvious that the cradle of civilization can't be located in both Africa and the Middle East. 1, Africa is part of the African plate. 2, Mesopotamia is part of the Arabian plate. I struggled with a definitive answer for a long time until I decided to take up a study on the Garden of Eden. The answer to this question may lie in what we know about pre-divided geography. Pre-divided geography. Science supports the belief that Earth was all one single landmass named Pangaea before it was divided. It was the study of the Garden of Eden that prompted me to look deeper into Pangaea, the name that scientists gave the world before the Earth was rearranged by the continental drift. Take a look at the following map of what scientists believe the world looked like before it was divided. If we look at this pre-divide map based on the continental drift theory, we see that Saudi Arabia and the cradle of civilization are connected to Africa, and nothing else, not Europe or Asia. This scientific theory actually supports both sides of the argument, because the current Middle East was once considered to be part of Africa. Some believe that the continental drift theory supports the following verse. And unto Eber were born 2 sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Genesis chapter 10, verse 25. We could argue that because the earth was all one giant landmass, that there was no Africa at the time, and that would be correct. However, while it wasn't Africa in name, people with similar skin color still inhabited the area, pre- and post-divide. In order to understand the origin of these people, we need to start in the Garden of Eden. Those that dismiss Pangea as valid science probably do so to hold on to the belief that Israel is part of Asia and not Africa. Let's look at the difference between Eden and the Garden of Eden. Eden was not the garden. This is a simple but often overlooked minor detail. The garden was planted in Eden, but the garden was not Eden. To understand where Eden was, we need to consider where the garden was. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Genesis chapter 2, verse 8. We see that the garden was planted eastward in Eden. And if we accept the explanation that the garden was in Mesopotamia, we need to understand where Mesopotamia is. As the map shows, Mesopotamia takes up the entire area separating the Middle East from Asia. This area is known as the Fertile Crescent. If we refer back to the Pangea map, we will see that the Fertile Crescent was as far east as anyone could travel before running into the ocean pre-continental drift or pre-divide. If the garden was planted in the east, it means Eden also encompassed the land to the west of the garden. On the Pangea map, the land to the west is Arabia, Africa, South America, and a small portion of Florida. One final explanation for Eden is that it could represent the entire landmass that we refer to as Pangea. However, when we look at the biblical geography, the only locations mentioned are Africa and Arabian rivers. The name of those rivers are Pison, referred to at Genesis chapter 2, verse 11, which encompassed Havilah. Gihon, referred to at Genesis chapter 2, verse 13, which encompassed Ethiopia. Hiddekel, referred to at Genesis chapter 2, verse 14, which flows east toward Assyria. And Euphrates, referred to at Genesis chapter 2, verse 14, where no description is given.